What's going on guys, Kate is here, welcome back to a brand new video. And today we are checking out the top 5 best ganking builds in Albion Online. So first things first, no matter if you play with a lot of players or do ganking as a solo player, you will find the best build for you in this video. And then even on top of all of that, for each build I will explain the items and spells I picked, why I did that and how to use them in the best possible way. And then at the end of each build, I will show you an example of me ganking a player using the build. So in general, you will see a full in-depth tutorial on how to gank, the best builds to do so, and much more. So with all of this said, if you're ready to have some fun, then let's get right into it. Then moving over to the first one on the list, which is a glaive ganking build. So for the main weapon, you go with the glaive and pick the first Q, then the last W, and E obviously stays the same. And for the passives, you go with the first one. And then moving over to the first gear piece, which is the royal helmet. And for its ability, you go with the third spell and pick the second helmet passive. As for the chest piece, it is called the Graveguard's armor, so you go with the third ability. For the first passive you pick the second one, and for the third passive you go with the first option. Then for boots you pick the hunter's boots and go with the third ability and fourth, aka the last passive. And then last but not the least, for the cape you go with the Thetford cape. For food you pick the T7 omelet, and for potions you go with the tier 8 poison potions. And as in this video, I'm using a flat 8 build, but if you're a new player or don't want to spend that much money, you can use all the same gear starting from tier 4. And with that said, now let's take a look at the fun part, which is the ganking tutorial. Okay, so first of all, there are a few things to know. As the horse was running into us, we used our Q and then the poison potion, and then you can just rotate the Q and W whenever you get it up. When you see the player is stunned, use your D ability, which will stun him again. Whenever the enemy is getting a longer distance, you keep on using your E, which will throw him back to you, and you use your R ability, which will throw him back as well, just with like a chain slash ability. As in this video, the player wasn't using that much of his abilities, but if he was, you feel free to use your F ability, which will give you like a speed boost on your boots. But if the player is in a normal range and you can keep on poking him, which every 3 normal attacks will damage him, and on top of all of that the cape will damage him and everything else. So in a quick overview, whenever you are close to the enemy, just keep on using all of your abilities. It doesn't really matter in what order, just keep on using your Q whenever all the other ones are down. And when you see that player is using his boot ability, pop yours. And then at the end pop your R ability, which will put on an enemy a quick chain slash, and at that point you should secure your kill. And in conclusion, for this build, it is really good. It works the best with 2 to 3 players, and your main role is to pull back the enemy and try to slow him as much as you can, and let your friends deal the damage. This is mainly a group ganking build, but don't worry because I have a bunch of solo player builds coming up next. Then taking a close look at the second ganking build, which is the solo player's double-bladed staff build. So for the main weapon, aka the double-bladed staff, you go with the first Q. Then the second W, E of course you cannot change, and for the weapon passive, you pick the first one. Then as for the helmet, you choose the mage cowl and pick the third ability and the first passive. Then for the chest piece you go with the Graveguard armor, and like in the previous build, pick the third ability and then the second option for the first passive. And for the third passive, you go with the first option. Then as for the boots, they are called the hunter shoes, and for them you pick the third ability and the last, aka the fourth passive option. Then last but not the least is the cape, which you pick the Thetford. For food you go with the tier 7 omelet, and for potions you pick the tier 8 poison potions. And now let's take a look at the fun part, which is the ganking tutorial. So your main goal with this double-bladed staff build is to use 2 poison potions, and one of those poison potions is the mage cowl, so you try to pop it right away and then use the poison potion. Whenever the player is off the horse, then you can use your Q and W every 3 to 4 spells or the normal attack abilities. It will stun the enemy, and then you keep on using the rest of your abilities like the E, which will stun him again, and it's like a dash thing. Then whenever your helmet, aka the mage cowl, is back, keep on using it. It is like an extra poison potion, it keeps on damaging him every few seconds, and when the player keeps on running, use your W to stun him again. And finally, the main goal to secure your kill with this build is to keep on using your space bar, which should auto attack the enemy and keep on stunning him. As this build doesn't do that much damage, the main objective is to keep on stunning him while applying mage cowl and poison potion and finishing him off that way. And in conclusion, for this build, it is really good for solo players, but it's viable for group ganking as well. And last but not the least, of course, if you're a new player or don't want to spend that much money, you can use all of this gear just with tier 4. Then moving over to the third build, which is a massive damage dealer called the bloodletter. So this build is a jack of all trades, as it can be used very well for solo players and group ganking. And on top of all of that, if you're running away, you can use it as well, as this weapon has the highest mobility in the game. So for the build's choice, you go with the bloodletter and then you pick the second Q. Then for the W, you pick the fourth ability. For E, you obviously cannot change it, so keep it that way. And for the weapon's passive, you pick the first option. And on top of all of that, as this weapon is one-handed, for the offhand, you pick the miscolor. Then moving over to the helmet, which this time is Spectre's hood. And for the ability, you pick the third, aka the last option. And for the passive, you pick the third one. Then as for the chest piece, you pick the Stalker's jacket. And for it, you go with the third spell option and for the third passive option as well. Then last but not the least, for the boots, you pick the Hellion shoes and go with the third spell ability, and for passive, pick the fourth, aka the last option. And then, like per usual, for the cape you go with the Thetford cape, for food you pick the tier 7 omelet, and for potions you go with the tier 8 poison potions. And with that said, now let's take a look at the fun part, which is the ganking tutorial. So, as this build is a melee, so you cannot shoot it from the range, at the start of seeing a horse you want to use the poison potion. Then right away use your W, which will stun the horse, and at that point by using your W and Qs, the horse should be dismounted. And then at the start you keep on using your Stalker's jacket first time, and whenever the ability is done you use your E, which will reset the Stalker's jacket once again, and you keep on using it. The main objective with this build is to catch your enemy, which you should do with every single one of the builds, and for more damage I pick the Stalker's jacket, which you will be able to use twice as the helmet is basically a reset button. And last but not least, whenever you need to catch the player and he's getting really far, use your boots ability, which will just in 2 to 3 seconds dash right away to the player. And in conclusion, for this build it is really good for solo players and for groups as well. Like I said at the beginning, this build will deal a lot of damage and it will catch any player you want. So if you were looking for an amazing ganking build for solo players and for groups, then that's the best build for that. So try it out and good luck. Then for one of the last builds on the list we have a claw ganking build. So for the weapon you pick the claws. For the first Q ability you go with the second option. Then for the W you go with the fourth option. And E ability of course you cannot change. And for the weapon passive you pick the first option. Then moving over to the helmet, which is called the Fiend Cowl. So for it you pick the third ability, and for the passive go with the first option. Then for the chest piece you choose the Fiend Robe, and then for the R ability you pick the third choice, and for the passive take the first one. And then last but not the least are the soldier boots, and for them you pick the third F ability and the third passive as well. And as far as cape goes, you go with the Thetford cape. For food you pick the tier 7 omelet, and for potions you use the tier 8 poison potions. And now like per usual, let's take a look at the fun part, which is the ganking tutorial. So the main objective of claws is to stun their enemy and deal massive amount of damage. So first things first, what we can see, we use the poison potion and use the W to stop the horse, and then keep on using our Q. Then whenever we catch the enemy of the horse, we use your R ability, so to damage the player and take a lot of damage. And then we just keep on using all of our abilities. Whenever the W is back up, we stun the enemy again. Whenever the enemy keeps using his ability to run away, you just pop your D ability, which will purge everything that they have. And whenever the Q is up, you keep on using it, the W the same thing, and you finish the enemy. As this is a melee weapon, first of all you need to remember to use the poison potion right away when you see the horse. And remember to not use your weapons ability, which is E, whenever the enemy is still on the horse, because just with the poison potion and a W it will dismount the enemy, and then when you save your E for just the enemy himself, it will do a lot of damage and stun him at the same time. So in a quick overview, pop your poison potion and stun him with your W. At that point he should be dismounted, so use your E ability, and then rotate between abilities. Whenever he keeps running away, purge him with your D ability, and finish the kill. So in conclusion, this is a very powerful build and is mainly made for group ganking. So if you want to play as a support player for your group, then this is the perfect build to use. And with having all this said, now we have come to the last ganking build on the list, which is the Warbo. So for the weapon, you obviously go with the Warbo. Then for its Q ability, you take the second option. For W, you go with the fourth option. And then of course you cannot change the E ability, so it stays the same. And for the weapon's passive, pick the first one. Then further, taking a close look at the helmet, which is this time a Fiend Cowl. So for it you go with the third ability, and for the passive pick the first option. Then as far as the chest piece go, you go with the Assassin's Jacket, and for it you pick the third ability and the third passive as well. And then last but not the least are the shoes, which this time are the Soldier Boots. So for them you pick the third ability and fourth, aka the last passive. And like per usual, for the cape you go with the Thetford cape, and then for food you pick the tier 7 omelet, and for potions you use the tier 8 poison potions. And now let's take a look at the final build's ganking tutorial. So whenever you see the player on the horse, you use your poison potion, and then in a combination use your W and Q, which at that point should dismount the horse. Whenever the player is on the ground, you use your E ability and keep on rotating it. Of course, before that, if you want to really be sneaky, you can use your ambush, but I would keep it in just in case if you are especially a solo player to run away from players. As I have picked the Fiend's Cowl, you can use the Purge ability, which should remove all positive effects on the player. So whenever you see that he has popped his defensives or his boots, purge all of them right away and then use your soldier boots to catch up to the player and finish him off that way. As this build is super simple, there's nothing much to explain, so just keep on using your W, Q and E whenever you have them, no matter what rotation, and get the kill. So in conclusion, this build is really good to surprise your enemies, especially when you're using the invisibility spell before they see you. But that can be double-edged sword, so having one defensive, which can help you secure a kill or run away from it, in my opinion is amazing. And then on top of all of that, for new players looking for ranged DPS to gank players, this bow build is the best and easiest to use. Okay, so with all of this said, now we have come to the part where I'll tell you some simple tips and tricks for ganking that you should know. So first of all of this build you can easily start using from tier 4. And remember, the more players you have in your group, the more loot and players you'll be able to find and gank. But with that said, no matter what, if you are a solo player or a group ganker, the best places to gank is wait in tunnels which are connected to the main city roads. So here on the screen are just few simple examples on where you should sit and just wait for the players to come to you. Of course there is an option to just roam black zones and try to find gankers, but if you're lazy like me and can't get many friends to play with, then ganking on roads and tunnels is the best way so far. And in a quick summary, I just want to quickly explain why I exactly went with this type of builds. So in this video I try to give you a variety of options to choose from. So you get ranged like the Warbo, you have a support build like the Gloves or the Glaive, and then purely for solo player builds like the double bladed staff and bloodletter. As well as I try to mix and match the equipment so you would get and see variety of options for ganking, but of course you can mix and match them. So for example, if on a warbow you don't want it to have that surprise ambush ability, but instead the graveguard armor to pull the players back, then feel free to use and mix and match every build you want. And last but not the least, for each build's passives, food, capes and everything else, I chose to reduce as much cooldown for your spells as you can to catch the running players and try to secure your kill as fast as you can before other players catch you. And of course lastly, you might want to use a different food for more damage, maybe like a stew or different cape that gives you like a small lava area, but for the most part and most optional and easy spells to use, I found out that these 5 builds work the best. And that's about it. So I really do appreciate everyone for watching guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If by any chance you have more questions or you would like to see more guides, maybe a part 2 of this video, then feel free to comment all of that in the comment section down below. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe and enable that notification bell so you won't miss any more amazing 1v1 montages, most funny moments, Albion online guides and much more. And with all of this said, you have an amazing day and I will see you in the next video. So take it easy, peace.